Your body is messaging you 24/7. I hope you're not leaving it on red. Today we're going to talk about body acuity and sensory acuity, which basically means getting in touch with all of the ways that your body is communicating with you. Your body is your biggest truth compass. Your body will never lie to you. Your body is always communicating with you. And most of us do leave our body on red. Like it will nudge at us, then it will nudge a little harder, then it will give us a loud scream and cry, and then finally we're like, okay, maybe there's something there I need to look at or go to the doctor. So let's make that an easier process for you and help you understand what your body's trying to say to you when it comes to the ETCs that we've been talking about, and get a better understanding of what EC is, and then how we've been trying to cope, manage, control those messages rather than deal with them or know how to deal with them. Okay, so the first place to start are three of the main areas that you would feel your ETCs. The ETC of fear is often held in our stomach. It's where we feel like a knot in our stomach or butterflies in our stomach. It happens when we're nervous, when we're scared, obviously, when we're stressed, which is rooted in fear, when we're anxious, which is rooted in fear, even when we're excited, which is a positive form of fear, but there's still anticipation and uncertainty with excitement, which still makes it a fear-based feeling. And like I said, we often feel it in our stomachs. Grief is usually felt in the chest. That's where we hold our sadness, our pain, loss, heartbreak, and relationship woundings. And anger is usually felt in our fist, sometimes in our head, and it's usually felt in the sense of like our blood boiling. It makes us kind of grow hot. And that's another way to develop body acuity or sensory acuity, is through temperatures. Anger is almost always a hot feeling. Your body will maybe sweat, grow hot, grow red in the face. You would start clenching, and often you need to move. And if it doesn't come out through a verbal release, it will come out through a physical release, where you need to kind of direct it towards something or someone. Unfortunately, sometimes, either, screaming out profanity towards someone, or punching a wall, or punching a pillow, or hopefully a punching bag instead. And that's anger. Fear tends to have like more cold chills, so that it vacillates a little bit more. Fear, you feel it so much more physiologically in your body. It is the most physiological ETC that we have. Your heart starts racing. You may have cold sweats. You feel your body tensing up. You might feel tightness and knot in your stomach. It's also often in our shoulders and neck. It may also cause headaches, nausea, stomach pain, other GI problems, clenching of teeth, and maybe goosebumps sometimes. So it's really physiological in nature. It's probably the most physiological ETC that we have. And then there's grief. Grief is really heavy. It feels like you're wearing like hundreds of extra pounds on you, or carrying a really heavy backpack with stones in it or bricks in it. It's tightness in your chest. It's a lot of fatigue, just overly exhausted. Often you need to rest all the time, or you never feel rested. You might sleep for hours and hours, very, very long hours, called hypersomnia, and still never feel rested. Although fear can also, and anger can also create a sense of tightness in the chest, or breathing difficulties or breathing issues. With grief, it's a more passive energy. It takes from you. You can think that anxiety or fear and anger give to you. It's an active force, where grief takes from you. It's a passive force. It depletes you. It drains you. The aftermath of anger and fear also deplete and drain you, but that's usually once we feel the grief afterwards. And that's an even deeper issue to talk about, where fear and anger are actually more rooted in grief than anything else. And we can look at grief as the seed of all of our pain. But that is yet another video that we're not going to get into today. We're still just talking about the ETCs. So yeah, just a little bit of an overview on how to understand which one you're most rooted in. Are you having a lot of physiological symptoms? Is your head hurting? Is your stomach hurting? Are your muscles really tense? Are you very restless? Are you having a hard time? Are you fidgeting a lot? Are you having a hard time being still? Most likely, that's fear being fully activated in your system, versus you just have this fatigue, this lack of motivation, this brain fog. You're feeling heavy. You're feeling drained. If someone says, well, get up and do this, it's like, if I can't, I don't want to do anything. Your appetite really changes. Your energy levels really change. And also, you might want to sleep and rest, but it's still not rejuvenating you in any way. Most likely you're having a full-on grief activation in your system. And then anger, which is pretty clear, but it's just being annoyed, frustrated, angry. Your blood is boiling. It's an active force, and it wants to come out. It's something that needs to be played out and needs to be expressed fully. So hopefully that overview helped you today to understand in your body which ETC may be most active, or which ETC is trying to communicate most with you. And then the next part is how we have been trying to manage it, how we're trying to cope with it, and how we try to control it. But none of those are actually resolving the problem or addressing those ETCs that may be activated in us. Often we either avoid it and run away from it. We distract ourselves by getting busy with something else or someone else. We self-medicate by any type of dopamine seeking possible. Any type of dopamine seeking, and that goes from scrolling, which turns into doom scrolling, binge watching episodes, getting into sexual addictions, getting into alcohol addictions, getting into recreational or prescription drugs, and getting into risky behaviors, in other risky behaviors, in order to kind of feel a different feeling other than the one that we don't know what to do with, one of those ETCs. So let's say, like, if we're scared, maybe we'll go and work a lot, so we don't have to deal with the fear, so we don't have to feel the fear that we don't know what to do with. So if I feel in control at work, then everything's going to be okay. Or in a previous episode, I mentioned, like, overthinking is a symptom of an activated fear response. And we might try to do some type of compulsions by, like, checking the doorknob multiple times to feel in control. So often, one of the ways we try to cope with fear is to try to feel control. Numbing and sedating is usually when we go to our dopamine seeking options, where we self-medicate somehow. And that's because we're trying to deal with grief. Grief is so heavy and it's so painful, and we don't know how to get out of it, and it can take us to very, very dark places. And so we try to numb ourselves from it or avoid things that may make us feel that way. I had a client that was so upset over a work relationship that she would get triggered when she would see the person's name, so she had to block everything and would avoid seeing things, kind of like a trauma response or an exposure response, because it would create so much grief in her or activate the grief in her in that way. But it's not taking away the grief. We're just kind of making our lives even smaller just to avoid that ETC that we don't know what to do with, or don't know any other things or other ways to deal with it. So that's controlling, that's sedating, that's distracting. And then we try to manage it by a lot of the therapy tools that we have. And they do work. Don't get me wrong, they do work to some extent. But there's still a coping mechanism. There's still a way to keep you getting through an episode, but it's not always necessarily resolving. Those ways of managing those ETCs, I find to be best as a secondary part of the process rather than a primary focus, as a way to process through those ETCs that may be flaring up. Now, that's a quick overview of the different ways that we may be dealing with the ETCs, and that's mainly because we don't know what to do with it, or we don't know any other ways to deal with it, cope with it, or preserve ourselves, or tap into some type of self-preservation when we're feeling so much suffering through one of these emotions. And then there is the other option, which is going to help you actually resolve it, which goes back to the body acuity that we were talking about, is to stop leaving your body on red when your body's giving you messages. And the fastest way to develop this is to just become aware of what's going on with me, where am I feeling it. Let me just pay attention to it. Let me just be curious. What is my body trying to tell me? How can I start becoming more familiar with this message that my body is communicating with me? And that's where talking to a trained professional can really help you to understand what your body is communicating to you, and then how to actually resolve it, rather than constantly cope with it, deal with it, manage it, medicate it, control it, just so it keeps showing up and getting worse and getting harder. Because that's usually what happens when we don't resolve the core issue itself. Okay, well, I hope that helped you understand your body communicating to you, how most likely you've been coping with it, and then a whole new way of approaching it to start familiarizing with your body's communication. And I hope that helps. In our next video, we will take these ETCs into attachment styles and go into a little bit of a deep dive there. Thank you very much for being here with me today. May peace be with you. I'll see you next time.